Hello, in this class we will look at biomass, we will look at usage of biomass and also various issues associated with biomass. As we discussed in some of our early classes when we looked at the range of possibilities that exist with respect to non-conventional sources of energy, with respect to renewable sources of energy, biomass is a very significant contributor in that picture. And lot of people, and it is fundamentally considered as renewable. We are going to look at those details. It is fundamentally considered as a renewable resource, and potential for significant dependence on biomass is actually very high, because there are many aspects which drive economies and nations towards the biomass idea and the set of activities associated with use of biomass for energy. Even many companies are quite comfortable with the idea. At the same time, there are concerns relating to what exactly are we doing if we start using biomass, and what is the perspective with which we need to look at it. Are there issues that we should be cautious about, concerned about, and so on. So, in this class that is basically what we are going to do. We are going to just look at what is biomass, what are aspects associated with its usage, and what are some important issues associated with its usage. So, our learning objectives will be as follows. We will begin by describing what is biomass, so that we have a common sort of understanding on what is it that is being referred to as biomass, and then we can make our look at data related to it and then make our judgments on what is relevant with respect to it. We will look at the extent to which biomass is clean and renewable. So, this is something that we need to consider and think about and discuss a little bit. So, that is what we will look at. And we will also look at the different approaches in which biomass is presently being used, and in that context we will get a more complete picture of how much it has penetrated, or how much potential is there for it to penetrate into our energy mix, so to speak. So, these are our major learning objectives for this class. Alright, so to give you a background, first of all, power companies, these are companies that are generating the power for us, and we consume them. So, in our offices or in our schools or in our homes, we are consuming power. So, the power that we get at our at our home or office or school comes from a variety of sources. So, we actually are only seeing the electricity that is that we are getting from the switch, but where did that electricity come from, what sources were used to produce that electricity is not something that we have direct access to, or we are directly aware of. We simply get the electricity. So, in fact, over the course of a month or over the course of a year, the electricity you receive in your house may be from a variety of different sources. So, there may be say some months where you are getting it from primarily from some dam somewhere, another some few months where you may be primarily getting it off of some coal fired plant somewhere, and so on, or some other months you may be getting it from a nuclear plant somewhere else. So, this is because there are some seasonal variations associated with this, there are some demand variations across the across the country, across the state, etc., and there are multiple sources from which the electricity is being supplied. So, so that the electricity supply has a mix associated with it, and what we get is some part of that mix. So, we can sort of say the electricity that comes to our house is say 20% from nuclear energy, say 60% from thermal power plant, 20% from a hydel power plant. So, some mix like that will be there. So, that is the mix that we are getting. So, power companies, which are the companies that produce this power and then supply it to us, also have a mix in their what it is that they control. A particular company may be only been taking care of thermal power plants. So, then they have only control on that particular source of energy. So, most of those companies are under pressure to find alternative fuels to fossil fuels such as coal. So, typical thermal power plants, so a significant amount of energy that is that we are using in India is coming from thermal power plants. So, they are basically using coal, and coal is a fossil fuel. So, it has issues. Major issue is the fact that it is short in there is a limited quantity of it. We have stumbled upon it and we are using it up at a certain rate. So, it is a matter of time before we run out of it. So, there is a there is a deadline that is coming up at some point ahead of us. Based on what is possible with technology, etc., we may be able to push the deadline some more, because that is what has happened with many oil fields, for example. Many oil fields people abandoned at some point in time, saying that it is no longer profitable to extract the oil from that field. Then later they found new technologies which said that even though there is only less amount of oil remaining there, even that can be extracted, and that is still a significant amount. So they figured a way to revive some oil wells and then get more oil out of it. So this process goes on. So in every fossil fuel, maybe we think that 10 years down the line we may run out of fossil fuel, then we find that 10 years down the line people say no, another 20 years we can use the fossil fuels, and so on. So this deadline has been shifting. More specifically with respect to fossil fuels, people have always been saying in the next say 10-20 years we will run out of fossil fuels, and that seems to be continuously extending. But the truth is the quantity that exists in terms of fossil fuels is limited. So at some point in time we will run out, because we are continuously using it. So at some point in time we will run out of fossil fuels. So that is the exact date is the only thing that is in question, and it is not very far off. That is the point that we need to remember. Chances are within one generation we are going to run out of it. So by the time most of us are old people, chances are most of the fossil fuels will be out of, so given the rate at which we are using it. So the power companies are under pressure. So they know that if you have to continue providing power, you have to do something about the fuel that you are using. So they are under pressure to find some alternative to the fossil fuels such as coal. There is also national and as well as international thought processes and sort of agreements and peer pressure, so to speak, to try and increase the amount of renewable energy sources in the mix that is being used to provide energy within every country. So because they all understand the same thing, they all understand that we are going to run out of fossil fuel, we will do something about it. So many countries have adopted targets, and so for example which they have imposed on themselves, which they have publicly agreed to, and they are going to enforce on themselves. For example, European Union has agreed that 20% of the energy that it uses will come from renewable sources by the year 2020. Okay, so that is the kind of agreement that they have indicated. There are reports that India has said that they will go up to 40% by 2030. So everybody has given a different date and what kind of target that they are going to keep and so on. So these kinds of numbers are there. You maybe based on which report you read, you may see slightly different numbers and so on. But the general trend is of this order. You are looking at somewhere between 20 and 30 and 40% variation in what is going to be done, and in the next 10 years or so, 10-15 years is the time frame we are looking at. As far as we understand, for example, the United States has been hesitant to publicly, as a nation, to publicly accept a particular target. They feel that it impacts them in a negative way and so on, and there are political issues there. They are not comfortable, the political parties there are not comfortable making public agreements that they are going to curtail energy use in any way, or even change their energy usage pattern in any way. However, many of the states which are there within the United States have been much more active in agreeing to some targets, and they are also likely to achieve 20% conversion to renewable energies by the year 2020. So a lot of people are doing this. So there is interest in finding ways to enable more renewable energy sources to get included in the energy mix being used by the country, and they are actively looking for various such things. In that context, biomass takes up a significant importance. Okay. So it is basically because it is fuel derived from plant matter. Okay. So in a sense it is no different than people in olden days, people used to burn wood to light their stove. We had people who did not have access to good fuel. Even now based on cities and towns that you go to, you will find people who may not have enough income, who are basically collecting twigs from various places and using them to set up a fire and cook their food on it, right. So that essentially is biomass. You are taking some plant matter, in this case it happens to be twigs, and you are using it as fuel. This is biomass. Now we are talking of this in a national scale, okay, and not people who are struggling for facilities are pushed into a corner and taking twigs and trying to manage their lives. That is not what we are referring to in this context. we are referring to an entire nation taking the initiative to collectively, not necessarily collect wicks, but do something of that nature, which is basically to use plant matter to generate power. This is the basic idea. It is considered clean and renewable. So, this is something that we will discuss. We will discuss what is this idea of clean and renewable in the context of biomass. But that is the background, that there is a push towards more renewables just because we are running out of fossil fuels, and biomass happens to be a source of fuel which is considered renewable certainly, and also considered clean by many, and therefore, people think that this is the way to go. It seems to be something that many nations are more ready to include in their mix. It is also relatively more convenient and easy to include it in the mix. That is the reason why this push is there towards biomass. So, with that background, we will progress to understanding this potential source of energy a little bit better. Okay, so in terms of overview, the biomass, as I said, you can use twigs to burn a stove, and we can do some variations on it. Some of the reasons why biomass is of interest is that, first of all, it is very versatile. You get biomass in variety of forms, and that is very convenient because we use energy also in a variety of forms. So, more specifically, you can get it in solid form, you can get it in liquid form, or you can get it as gas. And that is really the 3 states of matter, the 3 most common states of matter are right there, and that is all the fuel that we need. So, that is all the forms in which we need the fuel for the most part. So, you may need gas for cooking, which is typically cooking, and sometimes even heating of rooms or spaces based on where you are located. We typically need liquid fuels for automotive applications. Mostly we are set up for that kind of a situation, and of course, we need solid fuels to run plants, big plants. It turns out to be much easier to do it that way. So, if you look at a large pattern of energy requirement and how we generate that energy and put it into our system, these are really the 3 different ways in which we will require it. This is more household, this is automotive, and this is power plants. So, those are the 3 different major categories under which we will use it, but of course, all of these can be used across across each other sectors that along the lines of what I have explained here. These sectors are not rigidly tied down to these categories, but just to give you an example, I have told you this. And interestingly, it already supplies, as of today, already the biomass is being used to supply about 10% of the world energy demand. On average, across all nations, if you take, about 10% of the world energy demand is already being supplied by biomass. So, that is quite significant. 10% of the world's energy usage is quite significant. It means it has already made its presence. It means there is an infrastructure, an economy, and processes. All that is there behind the scenes is already in place to support 10% supply of the world energy demand. So, it is already a significant player and has great potential to become a much more significant player. So, therefore, it is a good idea to have perspective on it. So, when we said biomass, I said that one example is people using wood based stoves, using twigs for running their stoves, and the other is to have large scale processes to do this. So, actually when you say biomass, how it is coming into the energy sector from the fact that it is something that is a farm related sector or a natural resource that is sitting around. From there, in terms of how it comes into being part of the energy sector, which is what we are using in terms of energy, really 2 major ways it happens. It happens both due to traditional small scale wood gathering, which gets converted to fuel in different places, or also due to large scale farming processes. So, just the way you have agricultural crop, this is agricultural crop, but this is farming done exclusively from the perspective of energy demand, helping assess the energy demand situation. So, so these are 2 different range of activities from which you can pick up a biomass and put it into the energy mix, and both seem to be happening at this point in time. And also from an economic perspective, from say a political perspective or a social perspective, biomass is also very important and significant contributor to the society's structure in the sense that it provides a significant source of employment. I mean, supplying 10% of the world's energy needs is a significant quantity, significant impact. So, if you have 10% of the world's energy demand being supplied through this process, all the people who are involved in this process are being employed by it, right. So, are being employed by it. So, in fact, it is a significant source of employment in various places in the world, which addresses employment at wide range of training levels or skill levels, etc. So, this is a great source of employment. So, it is not just about energy, there is a multi-dimensional aspect associated with biomass, and therefore, it is sort of here to stay at least in the short term. It may stay in the long term also. I mean, there are enough drivers to keep it on for the long term, and it may even stay in the long term. So, that much more it is necessary for us to have a deeper thought process involved in the in understanding this biomass. Okay. So, when we say I told you that you can have large scale farming process involved in creating biomass. So, if you look at biomass agriculture, so this is just the way you would grow tomatoes or potatoes or whatever it is you would grow on your farm. This is agriculture meant for the energy sector. So, as it is, farmers are already growing corn for producing ethanol. Okay. So, this is already a process that is on. So, there are many huge farms that are now generating corn based product primarily for the energy sector, because that corn is not going to be sold in the market for us to consume as food, it is going to be converted to ethanol and then that is going to be used as a fuel. So, this is already on. So, this provides an alternate source of income to the farmer, right. For the farmer, this is an alternate source of the income. For the farmer, this is an alternate source of income. And therefore, pricing is very critical, right. So, if the farmer can sell the corn as food for a price higher than he or she can sell that corn for fuel, then they will put it in the food market, they will not put it in the fuel market. But if it turns out that by taking this corn, converting it to ethanol, you will actually get a higher price for on a per kg basis of corn, then the farmer will more readily sell this corn to the company which is going to convert this to ethanol, right. So, there is a very specific economic decision here, which is how this whole biomass idea or concept impacts the society and enters into other aspects of the society which we do not immediately understand, right. So, we are simply looking at it as fuel that goes into a vehicle or fuel that goes into a power plant, but it has repercussions. The moment you say that fuel is coming from the farm, then you are telling the farmer that he has an option, that he or she can make grow food for consumption as food or grow food for conversion into fuel, and that is fine. I mean, everybody should have options. So, there is absolutely nothing wrong in a farmer having options. It is just that society as a whole needs to step back and see what are the implications. Does it mean that we are going to have a shortage of food because we are now focusing more on the fuel, or what are the other ways in which you can handle it. So, I mean, to the extent that you can handle it, this itself is not a major issue, but you can think, at least you need to apply thought in the process, right. So, that we know that we are not pushing the society into a corner where suddenly you may have a shortage which you may not be able to control in the short term, and food is something that we need on a daily basis. So, even if you have a sudden shortage of food for let us say 2 months or 3 months, that is not something that you can easily handle for a large population, right. So, that is something that is significant. So, it is in direct competition with food resources, that is the point we have to remember, right. So, it is in direct competition with food resources, especially when you do farming of this nature exclusively for the sake of the energy industry. So, there is a competition with food resources. So, we have to be aware of it, aware of the say the extent of it, the magnitude of it, so that we can keep it manageable and still be secure both from the energy perspective as well as from the food perspective. There is also, so biomass agriculture is one aspect of it. The other issue is also that you can use bio wastes. So, as part of normal agriculture, so if you were to use bio waste, then you are not really impacting the normal agriculture. So, normal agriculture in the sense agriculture for the perspective of food, right. So, agriculture for food, this is waste product from this is waste product from agriculture for food. So, to the extent that it is only a waste product from the agricultural process, it does not affect the food supply chain. So, so it does not affect so it does not affect food supply, because you have grown some crop and you have harvested that crop. So, that crop has already been harvested and sent into the food cycle for people to buy. It has gone to wherever the wholesale distributors are, etc. It goes that way. So, that is not being affected. But after the crop, main part of the crop is gone, you have a lot of waste associated with just regular agricultural process. So, that waste you can actually use as a biofuel. In that case, the first issue that we were discussing of, which is competition with food resources, is not an issue. Okay, so, that is something that we can look at. So, for example, straw, that would be an excellent example of this bio waste, so to speak. So, as I said, biomass is often a byproduct of or waste product from agriculture. So, straw is a major byproduct. Straw is a major byproduct from grain production. Okay, so, any grain you produce, you have plenty of straw that comes along with it. So, in fact, if you look at the weight percentage, that is very significant. You look at this weight percent, almost 40% of the weight of the overall product is the straw. So, so if you have a 1 ton total product that you make, right, so 1000 kilograms you make total product. So, of which 600 kilograms will be the grain, 400 kilograms will be straw. So, for every ton of the total product, 600 kilograms is the grain, which we will take for eating purposes, 400 kilograms of straw is just going to be sitting around, right. So, if you can use that 400 kilograms, that is a great thing to do. So, in fact, if you look at it globally, billions of tons are being produced every year of straw. Billions of tons of straw is being produced every year globally. However, only 100 million tons or so, roughly about 100 million tons is seems to be getting used in the form of biofuel or in the form of biomass. That is, this 100 million tons of straw or any other waste that is being generated is getting converted into a fuel that is then being put into the energy sector. The rest, very unfortunately, the rest of it is being burnt in the open or allowed to rot. Okay, so, this is a huge waste. I mean, we just burn it or you allow it to rot. So, when you burn it, you actually do damage in two different ways. First thing is you are burning it and you are releasing carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, right. Carbon dioxide, many particulate matter, lot of stuff is being released into the atmosphere when you burn the straw. Most importantly and very unfortunately in this case, you are not even using that energy, you are just burning it in open, that is it, you are just burning it, destroying it, throwing the energy, throwing the waste, throwing particulate matter, everything into the atmosphere, and nothing you are gaining from it. Only all the negatives you put together and hand off to society. That is basically all happens when you just burn it out in the open without any other purpose being served. So, this is what is happening unfortunately internationally. Only about 100 billion tons is being used properly to generate energy, and billions of tons out of the billions of tons that is available. All the rest of it is just being destroyed in a manner that is highly self destructive for us, right. So, that is something we have to really look at. So, for example, in India, one of the things that keeps coming to our news very regularly, every year we have this thing coming to our news, that if you look around October, November, you will see that pollution in Delhi shoots up, right. Pollution in our capital shoots up in a very significant way. Pollution in Delhi goes up in a very significant way. Typically, you will hear this news around October, November, and there will be a major spike, and the pollution is really bad. We are not just talking of slight increase in pollution, we are looking at situations where the amount of particulate matter in the air is 16 times, okay, so 15 to 20 times the upper permissible limit. Okay, so upper permissible limit itself is a high limit, where they say if you cross this limit, it is fairly dangerous to the health. Now, you are not crossing, you are not just so most of the time you want to be well below that limit. You do not want to cross say 10% of the limit or some such thing, you want to stay well below that limit. Now, not only you are not staying below the limit, you are crossing the limit, you are crossing it by an order of magnitude, more than an order of magnitude. So, you are crossing it by a factor of 15 or 20. That is a huge, you suddenly change the scenario of a place from being a livable city to something that is extremely toxic. You cannot be there, extremely dangerous. So, many times in October, November, last few years we have this situation that you have major shutdown in Delhi. Okay, so schools are all shut down, many things are shut down, people are asked to stay indoors, people are asked to use some kind of mask to cover their noses and so on. And even staying indoors, I do not know to what degree it helps, because ultimately the air still comes in. So that issue is there, but you have a lot of particulate matter. At least if you put something around your nose, to that extent you can avoid the particulate matter. But this is happening. Why is this happening? A very significant reason this is happening is that there are a lot of agricultural activities that go on in areas that are neighboring Delhi. Okay, so in states or neighboring Delhi, you have various places where there are a lot of agricultural farms, and it is this season when they change from one crop to another crop. And when they have harvested a crop, there is a lot of the waste of that crop that is sitting there in that farm, and they need to clear that waste and then start the next crop. So it turns out that for many of them, it economically and time wise, it works out very conveniently if they just light a fire and then they just burn the place down, burn the farm, all the waste in the farm is just burnt. So unfortunately, the economic reality and the convenience of quick disposal creates this situation where the large number of farms are just burning their waste. And this seems to be fairly well documented. There seem to be a lot of reports saying that at that point huge number of farms were burning, and it is strictly there are rules which prohibit this kind of an activity, but unfortunately the ground reality is that due to economic reasons, pressures, various pressures, etc., this seems to be the ground reality, that many people are burning their the waste in the farm, and as a result huge amount of pollution comes up. And this is dangerous even for those people, because whatever you may say, even though maybe the wind eventually takes the pollution into Delhi, wherever those farms are, wherever that burning is happening, with all these farms, neighboring farms burning, people who live in those places, their families, they are all breathing that highly toxic air, I mean highly injurious air, they are breathing for several days. So there can be nothing good about it, and maybe it is a lack of understanding of the situation, that and also the circumstances. There are circumstances that even if they understand it is not good for their health, they are in a corner where they need to really do something and they end up doing this, and this is a pretty bad situation, and a lot of efforts have to be made to educate them to stop this kind of burning, and to give them, not just educate them, to give them an avenue. So for example, the straw that is the waste material that is generated there, all the byproduct of this farming process that is lying there, so mostly in the form of straw, for example, that can easily be bundled and sent off to a plant where it can be burnt in a controlled manner, and you can generate huge amount of electricity, right. So this can be done, but for that to happen this has to be economical. So many times the report suggests that if they have to actually bundle this up and take it and go and give it to a plant which will accept it, that process of bundling it, the process of transporting it and going and selling it will cost them a lot more than what the companies are willing to pay them for, right, for that. So you take 1 kilogram of the straw and go and hand it off, if they are only going to give you 100 rupees for it, but it is going to take you 500 rupees to make that bundle, put it on a truck, take the truck to that place and hand it off. So you are going to spend 500 rupees delivering it, and they are going to give you 100 rupees for it. Nobody who is running any kind of business will see this as economically viable, and so on. So clearly governments need to assist them in some process to take care of this kind of waste disposal, and then try to do something more effective with respect to this. But the point being, this is a reality not just in some remote international location, this is a reality in our country, in our nation's capital. Okay, so it affects our nation's capital every year, and in a manner that is very dramatic, very visible, and affects a lot of people. Every year you are going to see, I mean you end up seeing this, you will see newspaper reports that it is just full of smog, full of smoke, particulate matter. You take a photograph, you can barely see 100 meters ahead of you. It is so heavily ridden with the smoke that has come into that city. So this is clearly something that needs urgent addressing, and it has got to do exactly with this idea of biomass, right. So this biomass in this case being destroyed, recklessly being destroyed, just because the circumstances are like that, and so something needs to really be done about it. And so in terms of bio waste, straw is there, unfortunately it is not being used. So if you choose to use bio waste and you can find a way to do it economically, at least you will not affect the food supply, you can actually stick to waste, and in a more comprehensive way you can use the entire cycle of the agricultural process from end to end. So this is something that we need to keep in mind. Okay, so what kind of substitutions are people talking about when you talk of biomass? In what ways is biomass being used? So, that is something that we will briefly look at. So, we do know that coal is being used extensively in thermal power plants. So, many times biomass is used as a substitute for coal, and in fact this is a major activity because as I said, the power industry is where the pressure is to say that we have shifted to renewable, because then that can be something that is reported. See, the general public, if you have somebody I mean who is poor and is using some twigs to do some cooking, it is difficult to document to what degree they are using what, and then see to what degree it has affected our power source, so to speak. Whereas the major part of our power comes from power plant. So, if you impact the way in which the power plant generates the power, that is how you report that you have made a change to the energy sector and you have made a change to make it cleaner or whatever it is that you are trying to project. So, the governments put pressure on power plants, and power plants find this as a nice way to proceed. So, they use coal instead of coal, where they had been using previously coal, they can now additionally add wood and add, so you have some percentage of coal, some percentage of wood. So, to the extent that they add wood, they have now added say 20, if you put 20% of by mass of wood, then 20% substitution you have done with a renewable source. So, we will talk about this idea of renewable shortly, but you treat it for the moment that it is renewable. So, we put it in as 20% substitution. And again, as a substitute for coal, instead of directly using the wood, you can convert wood to charcoal, which is basically wood heated in the absence of air. So, you first heat wood in the absence of air, it will remove a lot of volatile materials from it, various other unnecessary things will be removed from it. What will remain will be primarily carbon, and it is twice the energy content per unit mass. Okay, so, you can get much higher energy in unit mass, and therefore, that is much more useful for us when we try to get some useful power out of it. So, therefore, you can convert, so you can either use the wood directly as a substitute for coal, or you can take the wood, convert it to charcoal and then use that as the substitute. So, this is a way in which we are dealing with solid fuel, coal either as charcoal or wood is the substitute. Then we have in liquid form, which is petrol or diesel. So, for petrol typically ethanol is used as the substitute, and this is largely obtained by fermentation of corn and sugarcane, anaerobic fermentation. So, again absence of air. So, fermentation of corn and sugar is done, and from that we get ethanol, and that ethanol can be used as a substitute for petrol. And people have demonstrated, and in fact many petrol mixes that are out there usually have some maybe 10% of ethanol already mixed in it. So, each government has put in some rules on how much of this kind of ethanol should be there already added to the fuel, and to that degree it reduces dependence on incoming supply of petrol, right. So, for petrol the substitute is the biomass substitute is ethanol. Similarly, for diesel there is something called biodiesel, which is which can be derived from vegetable oils such as soybean oil. So, large amount of it is coming from vegetable oils, soybean oils, some animal fats, etc., can all be used to create biodiesel, and this can be used directly as a substitute for diesel. So, with varying levels of percentages you can use this ethanol for petrol, biodiesel for diesel, etc., and therefore, to that degree you change the mix of the fuel. So, this is so petrol and diesel in this case are biomass being used in biomass substitutes are being used for petrol and diesel. So, that is biomass substitutes in the form of liquids. And then finally, you have natural gas, which is being used by many of us. So, that can be substituted by biogas. So, biogas can be used to substitute natural gas, and this is also derived from organic wastes. So, we have many biogas plants, many farms will have biogas plants, many places you can have biogas plants which generates biogas, and that can be directly used for cooking in various ways. So, as I said, solid, liquid and gas. In all these three common states of matter, you can get your biomass supply you with some fuel, and then you can use that. So, these are the kinds of major substitutions that are being done with respect to biomass. Okay, so, if you look at the top 10 nations in terms of biomass electricity in gigawatt hours. So, the usual suspects are here, United States is here, you have China, then you have Germany, Brazil, United Kingdom, India is also there, Italy, Sweden, Finland and Austria. So, you can see a large number of nations are trying to introduce biomass, and this is in capacity in gigawatt hour. So, of course, you have to see this as a fraction of the energy that they use. So, that we are not really looking at this point, but there is a significant amount of energy that is being generated, and potential is there for this to increase dramatically, because many countries can get into using this. Not right now, not every country is actively pushing it, so they may actually end up pushing it further, and so potential for this to grow is quite significant. Within India, so this is the overall global perspective. So, we are sort of sixth, so to speak, in this list of currently the users of biomass as part of the renewable energy mix. Within India, if you look at the top 10 states in biomass capacity in megawatts, so we have Maharashtra, the second highest is Uttar Pradesh, then we have Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. So, Maharashtra, Uttar Pradesh, Karnataka and Tamil Nadu are 4 states that have significantly pushed in the direction of usage of biomass. We have a lot of other states also who have done some activities in this context. Andhra Pradesh and Telangana together have done are essentially after that. Chhattisgarh, Punjab, Rajasthan, Gujarat, Haryana. So, these are all the states that are the top 10 of energy usage. So, again there is a lot of variety here, just the way we saw across nations. Wide range of different nations contributing significantly or less significantly to the use of biomass. Similarly, amongst the states also there is a lot of variety. So, clearly here also there is room for significant changes or in terms of demand for biomass based on how the other states also look into this idea, see some benefits in the idea and build on it. So, for example, Punjab and Haryana have a lot of fields where they have a lot of hay. So, if they want to look at it, then that is something that they can consider. So, this is what it looks like across the nation. So, for example, in India, in fact 32% of the energy in the country is already coming from biomass or something like that, some reasonable 30% roughly is coming from biomass, and it impacts 70% of the population, both in terms of people being involved in the process, people utilizing the energy, etc. 70% of the people are directly or indirectly connected to this biomass usage, and we have various kinds of plants which are either connected to the grid or off grid kind of plants, this being the total being generated from the plants. And in all of these bagasse is a major part of this supply. So, what is bagasse? Bagasse is simply fibrous remains after juice has been extracted from sugarcane. So, this is actually very interesting. If you actually speak to several of the people who are involved in the sugarcane industry, who make who extract juice out of sugarcane and supply sugarcane and use that for generating sugar or supplying it as juice, etc. The interesting thing you will learn is that for many of them, in fact the sugar that they get out of the sugarcane is actually a byproduct. Okay, so from an economic perspective, sugar from sugarcane comes across to them more as a byproduct, whereas the waste that comes after you have extracted this juice out of the sugarcane, that waste which then they supply to the energy industry actually gives them more money from for the overall product. So, for say whatever 100 kilograms of sugarcane plants that they create, the money they will get for the sugar that they will extract out of these 100 kilograms of plant is less than the money they will get from the waste being of those same 100 kgs of sugarcane plants being supplied to the energy industry. So, this is a very nice win-win situation for the sugarcane industry, because it means more parts of the plant are being effectively utilized from an economic perspective. So, they grow a sugarcane, nothing is being wasted, they get juice out of it, the juice can be sold as juice, the juice can be used to create sugar, and whatever waste remains does not just sit there in the field, they are very happy to gather up this waste and then send it off to power plants, and they get paid for that also. So, that is and they get paid more for that. So, they are very happy to do that, and so this is what is happening in our country. So, this is the source for this is our MNRE. So, this data is available on the MNRE website. So, now let us look at this question, is biomass clean? Okay. So, the reason people think biomass is clean is because the carbon that is released, see basically you are burning something, right, you are burning wood. If you burn wood that has carbon, it burns and it becomes carbon dioxide. So, in that sense from a fundamental perspective, you are just putting CO2 into the atmosphere, and therefore, from that perspective alone you cannot think of it as clean. you are just burning wood and putting it out in the atmosphere, putting carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So, when you supply wood to a thermal power plant and they substitute some of the coal using wood, they have not actually changed the release of CO2 into the atmosphere. CO2 is still being released into the atmosphere. In fact, they may be releasing even more CO2 into the atmosphere. We will talk about that in just a moment. So, in terms of CO2 release, you are not making any difference. I mean, you are actually still releasing, but the big difference is the carbon that is released. The thinking is that the carbon that is released is what was captured by the plant originally. So, this is thinking slightly in the reverse cycle, so to speak. So, we are normally saying that there is carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, we should grow plants to capture the carbon dioxide, and that way we will clean up the atmosphere. So, here the thinking is reverse. The thinking is that you take a plant, that plant already captured a lot of carbon dioxide, right. So, in the process of it growing into being a plant, into a tree, it already captured a lot of carbon dioxide. So, when you now burn the plant and release the carbon dioxide, you are not releasing any new carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, you are only releasing the carbon dioxide that the plant originally captured from the atmosphere. So, in terms of a cycle, so you have a plant and you have atmosphere. So, you can think of it this way. So, we are saying that this is a cycle. You take plant, you burn it, you get CO2 into the atmosphere, that CO2, so it depends on where you are starting in your cycle. You can say that CO2 was already in the atmosphere, the plant captured it. Now, you burnt it and released it back into the atmosphere, so you have done no damage. Okay. So, CO2 was already in the atmosphere, this plant was grown, it captured all the CO2, and so now when you burn this plant, you are not releasing any new CO2, so you are not damaging the atmosphere. That is the thought process that is involved. But there are some issues. First of all, what about other impurities? Okay. So, when you burn a plant, you do not just get CO2, you get other impurities also that are released, we will see that in just a moment. So, you have more impact on the environment than just CO2. The second thing is the time scale. Okay. So, what kind of time scale are we talking about, that we will see in just a moment, and impact on wildlife. See, when you destroy trees, it is not just trees that you destroy, there is a lot of wildlife that depends on the tree, right. So, it could be anything, it could be squirrels, it could be birds, it could be any number of creatures that live on these trees, which have taken years to get used to that ecosystem, and then you just go, you cut those trees down and you make wood, and you are only talking of the CO2 cycle, you are not talking of all the side impact that it causes. So, that is another thing that you need to keep in mind when you look at the bigger picture of biomass, because when you say biomass and you say this is going to help in a nation's energy supply, then you are talking of a large amount of biomass. You are not talking of an assorted one twig being cut here or one small branch being cut there, etc., which itself may be an issue. But what I am saying is, it is not small scale, you are talking of entire forests being cut down for some activity, and then maybe some new things being planted there, etc. So, you are talking of something massive. So, then you have to really look at all the impact associated with it. So, if you are going to do a large scale disturbance to the wildlife in that area, simply by cutting down trees in a massive way, replanting them, recutting them down and so on, then that is again something you cannot ignore it, you have to understand what you are trying to do and what you are doing. So, that is something that we have to look at. So, time scale, let us look at the time scale. Lifespan of a tree is anywhere from 50 years to 3500 years, based on the type of tree that you are looking at, you will find the trees have lifespan of 50 years to 3500 years. So, when you say that the tree or tree captured the carbon dioxide, it took 50 years to capture the carbon dioxide. Please understand, even at the lower end of the spectrum, it took 50 years to capture the carbon dioxide. So, now let us look at it. You have the life cycle of a tree, let us say the circle represents 50 years of life. Okay. So, you start at some point and you go through this past number of years, you come back, it is 50 years, you complete the circle, right. How much time is required to burn a tree? You can burn a tree in like maybe I do not know an hour, you can burn a tree in an hour. So, you take a tree that took 50 years to grow and you burn it in 1 hour, right, and 1 hour. 1 hour is barely a dot on this circle, right. So, whatever carbon dioxide it captured in 50 years, you released back into the atmosphere in 1 hour. So, you can argue that the argument that is made is that many things happen to the tree in the natural process, it dies, it rots, and so many things can happen. So, it may anyway release some carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, that question is always being made. But the point is, when a tree dies naturally in the environment, many things happen, and many of the constituents of the tree are consumed by other creatures, and therefore, it is not released into the atmosphere so directly, right. So, only a small fraction of that, only a certain fraction of the carbon dioxide associated with the tree, carbon and carbon dioxide associated with the tree gets released into the atmosphere as part of the natural life cycle of the tree after it dies, at least in the immediate context. Whereas here within 1 hour you release all the carbon dioxide possible from the tree into the atmosphere. So, we have to understand that time scale is a very important thing in the grand scheme of environmental protection. It does not matter if you look at the urgency of the situation, when you say that carbon dioxide content is going up faster and faster and faster in the atmosphere, we need to control the carbon dioxide content now, right. So, it does not help if you say I will figure out a process that after 300 years something will happen to the carbon dioxide which will be slightly better than what is happening now. That is not how it works, we want to do something now. So, if you are looking at it from that perspective, this is actually not helping. You are putting excessive amount of carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere now. You may attempt to clean it up later, but that is not now, right. So, this is something that we have to keep in mind, that the time scale is important. Time scale is something that is not being acknowledged significantly in this process. If you want to capture this carbon dioxide back within 1 hour, right. So, you took one tree, it took 50 years to grow, and then at the end of 50 years in 1 hour you burned the tree. You release a huge amount of carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere. Supposing you want to recapture that carbon dioxide also in 1 hour, okay, I am just giving 1 hour as an example, you may be able to burn a tree down in 10 minutes also, that is not the point. I am just giving you an idea that 1 hour seems to be a sufficient amount of time to burn down a tree. So, let us assume that you burnt a tree down in 1 hour and you use the energy, let us say I am not saying you just burn the tree uselessly, you use the energy for something. In the process all the carbon dioxide associated with the tree was released back into the atmosphere. What do you need to do to recapture that carbon dioxide in 1 hour? That is the point you have to keep in mind. So, if you say I am going to plant more trees to capture the carbon dioxide and therefore it is all fine, how many trees will you put in place so that you will recapture that carbon dioxide in 1 hour? We never think of it that way. We simply say I burnt a tree, I planted a tree. So, that tree that you are planting today will take another 50 years before it can capture the same amount of carbon dioxide you just released this hour, right, because that has also got to grow fully, and for that it is going to take 50 years. At the end of the entire lifespan of 50 years it will capture back this carbon dioxide you released in 1 hour. So, that is not at all helpful, that is not at all helpful in the grand scheme of things. So, it is like saying, I mean, so therefore, if you really want to say this correctly, you have to say that I burnt one tree, I have planted like 500 trees or whatever, some 5000 trees, and these 5000 trees will capture back this carbon dioxide in 1 hour. Then you are really getting close to an equation that makes sense. Okay, maybe that may be an extreme view of looking at it, but I am still saying, pointing out the idea that you cannot just say I burnt a tree, I will put a tree in and in 50 years from now it will all be okay. That is not how it works. So, it is in the context of time scale in two particular ways that biomass people question the the cleanliness of biomass. The first one is the time scale, because the time scale with which you are going to release that CO2 is nowhere close to the time scale in which you can capture it back, right. It is so much faster to release the CO2, so much slower to capture it back. That is number one. And number two, lot of the impurities, other impurities from the tree which are not there in the atmosphere are also going to be released, such as you are going to get CO2, you are going to get carbon monoxide, you are going to get sulfur oxides, you are getting nitrogen oxides. So, these are other gases that you are putting into the atmosphere which could be even more harmful than CO2, and those are all coming from the tree. And also you have to understand, if you are saying it is clean, you keep saying it is clean, you have to understand what is the context. Again, if you look at it, the calorific value of wood is significantly less than the calorific value of coal. So, it means if you are going to substitute some coal, you are going to remove some coal from your mix of fuel and then resubstitute that with substitute that with wood, saying that I will remove 10% of coal, I will substitute back with 10% of coal I will remove, I will substitute that with wood. You cannot substitute back with 10% wood, you have to substitute back with almost say 15 or 18% wood to make up for this difference, this 15 versus 25, right. So, if you remove 1 kg, you have removed 25 megajoules. You cannot put 1 kg of wood, you have to put more than 1 kg of wood, you may have to put about 1.6 kgs of wood. So, 1 kg, 1.6 kg of wood, 1 kg coal, right, in terms of energy. So, 1.6 times will get you that another 10 megajoules roughly, and that will get us to this 1 kg coal. So, if you burn 1.6 kg, so 60% more or something like 60% more CO2, or some may not be exactly 60%, some number, some larger amount of CO2 is going to be released to get you this same amount of energy, right. So you, or and 60 or a certainly larger amount of other impurities as well. Something, some 60 may not be exactly 60%, maybe some other number, because you may have to account for various other aspects associated with it, but some number. So, it is going to be higher, that is the point, right. So therefore, when we say it is clean, you have to question it from a number of perspectives, and these are perspectives that are very relevant perspectives to look at. So, in conclusion, extracting energy from plant or plant derived products is referred to as biomass energy, and we saw that biomass energy can be available to us in solid form, in liquid form and in gas form, and therefore, it very nicely substitutes for already existing fuel lines which are in solid form, liquid form or gas form, and a significant amount of population can benefit from it economically, because it opens up a supply chain where they are directly involved. It is not just a oil company which has drilled a hole into the ground that is involved. So, therefore, it is very nice. However, there are issues in the sense that when you talk of carbon neutrality of biomass, that is carbon neutrality from the perspective that whatever carbon was captured is the only carbon that has been released, and therefore, it is carbon neutral. But it is complicated because you have to keep in mind things like time scales and so on. I also spoke about the fact that environmental impact from the perspective of how other say wildlife is affected by this process also needs to be kept in mind, and therefore, when you say it is renewable, that is true, it is renewable. When you say it is clean, you have to look at it with little greater care to understand what we mean by clean, and then you have to define that and accept that within that context is what you are talking. And then finally, if you look at it, you find that plant products can either be directly used as fuel to power plants or can be converted to petrol or diesel and then be used. So, it is a significant activity that is on which impacts the way our energy is supplied to us and used by us, and has a lot of ramifications from the perspective of the environment as well as economy and the lives of people. So, that is the sum and substance of the biomass as as a discussion, and that sort of gives you an overview of this area. Thank you.